All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to our discussion on World War II. So last time we talked about basically how the US gets involved in the war, and now we have to get ourselves ready for war. So we are going to take a look at mobilization for America to fight. So what do we have to do so that we can go over to Europe, start kicking Hitler's butt, start going through the Pacific and start getting the Japanese out of the areas that they're conquering. All right, so getting into it. For success, we require the total commitment of the country's resources. So on the home front, we're going to see public education and mass media promoting nationalism, promoting America being a strong country. That's one thing. You got to get the people on your side, with like wanting to go after the bad guys. So you also are going to need to mobilize your economic resources. The government and the different industry sections are going to forge a close working relationship to allocate or get resources being used effectively for the war. All right. So what this is going to mean is rationing. We're going to see fixed amounts of goods being consumed at home by the everyday citizens. We're going to see them used to maintain the essential products for war. So, most resources, most food, most clothing, most rubber, most gasoline, most steel, we're setting aside for use for our troops. And a limited supply is being made available to the everyday citizens who are not participating in the war, the ones who are still at home. All right. Now, people are going to see this as a way to help with the war. So even if they're not able to go and fight, they still feel like they can do something to help win. So like this poster right here is talking about, car sharing club, that's, carpooling, carpool with other people to conserve gas. So there's more available for our tanks and planes and ships to fight against the Axis powers. All right. How do we pay for the war effort? Well, one way is we're going to see income taxes being raised drastically. So the government's taking more money out of your paycheck. We're going to see war bonds being sold. This is basically like a savings bond. You're giving money to the government for them to help pay for the war, and you're getting in exchange a certificate that says, you know, basically after this amount of time, like when the war is done, you can trade this certificate in and you will get your money back plus some extra interest as a thank you for giving money to the war effort, right? So a lot of Americans are going to take a lot of pride in buying war bonds to help pay for the fight. So, you might get somebody who's buying, some here and some there, like once or twice a month type of deal. Some that are only buying once, some that never buy, or just some that are buying constantly when they have any spare money. Right? Celebrities would be used to promote buying war bonds. Now, you can see an example of this if you watch, for the Marvel movies, if you watch the first Captain America movie, the one where he becomes Captain America, when he's going on tour doing all these big promotions and shows, he's promoting the sale of war bonds to help pay for the war effort against the Nazis. All right, businesses, what are they doing to help fight and win the war? They are converting from peacetime to wartime production. So we are seeing, car manufacturers like Ford or Chevrolet or something like that. They're no longer making cars. They might now be making tanks and planes and boats. And with the high demand of production, they are very, very willing to be changing over their tools to be making these war machines instead of these regular civilian machines. Instead of refrigerators, they're making bombs. You know, things like that. Instead of, making suits and dresses for people to wear, their Sunday best, they're making uniforms for soldiers. Like, I had a great grandmother who was a seamstress back in the 40s, and she helped make parachutes for our troops. And, you know, human resources, people, they needed to be managed as well. Like, our products that we're giving our soldiers are only as good as the people making them. So, people really are the number one greatest resource that the Allies had during World War II. If it wasn't for the people at home making as good of products as they could, our soldiers may not have done as well as they did on the battlefield. Now, building the army, we're going to see the selective service being used to draft men who are needed for war. Women were also able to join the armed forces, but they were not a part of combat. They were in non-combat roles. They were working in the office buildings. They were working in the hospitals. They were working in the supply departments. They were driving cargo trucks and things like that. Like, anybody who's ever seen the show Golden Girls, Bay Arthur, the one who plays Dorothy, the very tall of the ladies who star in that show, she was a truck driver during World War II, shipping supplies back and forth for the Allies. Um, we also see that with minority groups. They're in a lot of these service roles as well. Like, we're going to see, for example, Morgan Freeman. Everyone knows that actor. He was a truck driver during World War II as well. All right. So women are entering the job force in these traditionally male jobs, but because the men are being needed for fighting, they are now being used to replace the men who are gone, and they are putting out just as good a quality product as anybody else was. We're also going to see desegregation struggling to be gone through and obtained for the armed forces, and we're also going to see a movement to try and end discrimination for hiring for jobs. So, because we need people in the factories, right? And the government's going to get behind this one. So, like, we have some more Dr. Seuss like comics that are talking about, if we want to be successful, maybe we should try and include everybody in the process, because we're only as good as the people we let in. So, women increasing participation in the workforce. They're now in jobs that previously were held by men because we need people in there to, make things. And one of the biggest, representatives of this is this character, Rosie the Riveter. She was a big symbol of it. Like, the men aren't here. We need to step up and we can do it. We're American women. We're strong. Let's prove it to the world. Now, African Americans, we're still at the tail end of the Great Migration. Like, there's a big surge in the 30s and 40s, like a second coming of it. And they're still being subjected to discrimination and segregation in the workforce. But we're going to see a campaign that is going to be pushing for victory in the war and equality at home. And to get this really going, President FDR is going to ban discrimination in all war factories. So anybody who's making tanks, bullets, bombs, planes, uniforms, you are not allowed to discriminate in your hiring practices, or you could lose that government contract for making supplies that the government is going to then pay for the war. Like, there were some serious repercussions if these companies did not hire anybody who was qualified, no matter their race or gender. And because of all these practices, the US government is going to become the largest consumer of American business during the first half of the 1940s, because we need everything possible to fight against the Axis powers. All right, that is going to do it for us today. So when we come back next time, we are going to be talking about the actual like fighting that's going on. So we're going to talk about some key battles and some troop movements, things like that. All right, so be sure to come back for that next time, and I will talk to you later, guys.